Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian talk show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and our guests will be actually in our team. There are substitutions, so we will have two substitute players. One is the founder of the network, Nick Palivela. Welcome to the show, Nick,
Hey Sasha, how you doing?
and also Mark Lee, producer of the show. Thank you. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, what I'd like to discuss with you is so-called 28 points peace plan of Donald Trump. Let's just make a short history of the plan, and then we'll go point by point. The history of the plan is this. A couple of days ago, there was a leak that there is a kind of a secret peace plan worked out by Vitkov and Russian counterpart Dmitriev, the son-in-law of Vladimir Putin. Okay, so plan is a plan. Okay, nice. And then when after the leaks went public, then correspondents started to ask the State Department. For example, Marco Rubio was asked, "What is about this plan? What exactly is it?" He said, "Well, it's just a kind of a communication paper for discussions, and there's nothing serious about it." But a day later, Donald Trump came out and says, "That's exactly what is my peace plan." So now there is no doubts anymore about who created this plan, when created, how created. It was Donald Trump's peace plan. That's about the history of the plan. But interestingly enough, that now it's quite obvious that Marco Rubio was one of the principals of that document. Also, should we say that he was lying? Maybe, maybe not. So, Nick, what's your impression about this?
Well, I'm wondering if it has any chance, Sasha. I was going to ask you about that, whether this peace plan has any chance, or it's just people talking again, and that there's no real serious commitment on Russia's
Right.
side.
People are talking about it. That's all point of this plan, to make people talk. So
Yeah.
when people talking about the plan, they're not talking about Epstein files, they're not talking about economy and a lot of other wonderful things. They're talking about peace plan. What could be so bad about peace plan? So the worst case scenario, it will be rejected. Actually, it was already
Right.
rejected. It's already
Right.
rejected. So let's not play that we all hope that somehow this plan will be accepted and there will be long-lasting peace in Ukraine. No, it's not. It's not accepted. It's rejected, and now Ukraine and Europeans are preparing a new, real peace plan, which will be called anti-Trump peace plan.
So Trump has no leverage. I've got a list of the 28 points, and just at first glance, there's stuff that nobody would agree to. It is expected that Russia will not invade neighboring countries, and NATO will not expand further. So how are you going to get anybody to agree to that? Plus, expected. It's like you're not holding Russia to any standard. Well, we're expecting they won't do that. So it's garbage top to bottom.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Lockwood when he said it's going to be one on the battlefield. The United States sent over the ATACMS, but according to Russia, they shot them down again. And it's not good if you send over missiles and they all get shot down. That means they're not hitting their targets. But at the same time, I've heard that the Russians overextended themselves and are basically getting slaughtered by the Ukrainians. So it's almost like we're at a standstill. This is like a World War I scenario.
It's been a standstill, and winter is a couple weeks away, and nobody makes advance. Nobody's going to gain ground in the middle of winter. It's pretty harsh over there. Ukraine isn't happy about getting hit with stuff, but they're happy for for Russia to keep expending, troops and weapons because and not gain any ground.
Okay, the position for Ukraine of the so-called peace plan of Trump is that, look, Russia is winning. It's just bigger, it's stronger, it's taken over. And if Ukraine will not accept this plan actually is nothing but capitulation of Ukraine. That's all what it is. So if Ukraine will not capitulate and accept this peace plan, then Russia will take over not just its 4 or 5 territories, but 7 or 8 territories, maybe all Ukraine anyway. Okay, let's look at actually what's happening in reality on the front line in Ukraine. There was an article just a couple of days ago in The Economist, very influential UK publication. What they're saying is that the last 3 years, Russians made almost no progress in Ukraine, sporadic here and there, the movements. They didn't capture any significant city in Ukraine. They are losing in proportion, 5-1. For each Ukrainian, there are 5 Russian losses. So how the countries that made no progress in 3 years, who are losing 5 times as many men as Ukraine, can claim a victory? Nick, tell me your opinion on how it works.
Okay, here's how they're claiming victory is they have gained landmass on the Eastern Front, and of course they gained Crimea without even firing a shot. So their idea of victory
12 years ago, though. It was 12
Yeah.
years ago.
Crimea was a long time ago.
In the last
But
years, what they've done.
the Donbass region has been taken over, and the eastern side has been taken over by the Russians. So they're claiming victory. Hey, look, we have 1/3 of the landmass of Ukraine.
They don't. They have at most 20%.
Okay, maybe you may be right. Maybe 20%. They used to have 1/3, but they got their butts kicked in the north end, so they lost a lot of the land, and so now they're basically down to like 20%. So their idea of victory is, hey, we have 20% of the landmass of Ukraine, hence we're victorious. But as you know, Sasha, in reality, they've gone nowhere in like the last year. I mean, they've just all it is a slaughtering field for the Ukrainians to slaughter the Russians. So I don't know what Putin's objective is. I believe it was a blunder on the chessboard for him to go after Ukraine. If you wanted to go after other countries, Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan or even Kazakhstan, they're a lot easier. In other words, why would you pick on a country that's actually a pretty tough country to take over? So I think he made a blunder, and I think he's very stubborn, and he's going to sit on his blunder, and I don't know.
Yeah, but the resolution of this conflict is very simple. Russians don't understand anything as the raw power. So if Ukraine would be given, and it is given now by Europeans, all kind of weapons in abundance, and Europeans are financially taking care of Ukraine, and they're very close to take over this Russian couple of $100 billion that are stuck in Brussels. So Ukraine will have abundance of both weapons and finances. So then if US is such unreliable partner for both Ukraine and European Union, who needs them? By the way, you know that Ukrainians are, and by the way, Canada is no longer buying F-35s from US. They're buying now Sweden-produced Gripen by the company Saab, and Ukrainians are buying 100 French-produced Rafales and other weapons. So US is losing its economic strength in the West, its political weight. Everything is going down, down, down. And this is on top of this economy, the Epstein and all that stuff. So Trump is creating so-called peace plan, which is already rejected. I was fine. I have all those 28 points, and I wanted to discuss point by point with all of you to explain.
But before you do that, let's talk about the U.S. has no leverage over Ukraine. In the past year, the U.S. has given zero aid to Ukraine, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
And even the year before, the last year of Biden, almost no aid. So Ukraine it isn't losing anything by blowing off the U.S.
Yeah, well, they've also learned to be self-sufficient. They're they're producing drones internally now, which I think is pretty smart. If they're going to defend themselves, they need to have their own war machine produce these drones, because I think Dr. Lockwood also said that that's the wave of the future, because it's a lot cheaper, a lot less expensive to produce 100 drones than one F-35, because F-35s you have to design where a person's inside of them. In a drone, it's just basically a guided missile that flies through the sky. And if it's shot down, oh, well, too bad. If it hits its target, good. So, they can mass produce these drones, and drone warfare looks like that's the wave of the future. Unmanned drones that are basically killing machines. And I think what's going to happen, Sasha, that these drones are become more and more sophisticated. Right now, they're being shot down, but what some smart tech guy is going to do is invent one that can go through systems without being shot down or even being discovered, similar to the B-2. And then you're going to see a change in what's going on the front. The other thing is the U.S. does have a lot of weapons that are highly classified that haven't been transported over there. And I think they're just holding back because of some of their weapons that are highly classified, they just don't want people to even know about. So they're not putting them on the front. Russia, if you look at it as a country, it doesn't even have the population of Bangladesh. It doesn't have the GDP of Spain. Spain has more money than Russia. It's kind of a tiny little country with a big landmass, a big ego, and nuclear weapons. That's it,
So, well, let's do a price comparison really quick. An F-35 costs $100 million.
Okay.
A drone produced in Ukraine, depending on what type, can cost between $400 to $55,000 to the fanciest ones cost $250,000. So, for the cost of one fighter jet, you can make, 50,000 drones.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I mean, the thing is that there's just more. It's more economical just to produce drones than it is to produce a fighter jet.
Exactly. And Ukraine is producing not just drones, they're producing very sophisticated missiles now. And by the way, while Russians are claiming that they intercepted ATACMS missiles, for some reason they cannot intercept Ukrainian-produced missiles, and they keep hitting all these oil refineries and other military points and so on. So this is really bizarre that Ukrainians' missiles are now much more effective than American-produced missiles. So who needs them?
Here's one more thing. Ukraine is currently producing 4 million drones a year, which surpasses the combined output of all NATO members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
4 million.
That's a lot. 4 million is a lot.
That's what, 10,000 drones a day?
Yeah. And the thing is, they have they can put them to good use on the Eastern Front. So I just don't see Russia winning this at any time soon, because what you just said, the numbers just don't make sense. You got a country that doesn't have the population of Bangladesh. It's got a GDP smaller than Spain, and you've got another country that can produce 4 million jet drones a year. The numbers just don't make sense for Russia. I don't know why they're even involved in this. There's nothing to be gained, a lot to lose.
I would like to illustrate how is it equation for each Ukrainian. Russia is losing 5. So the proportion is 5 Russians for 1 Ukrainian. How is it actually happening? Ukrainians are very smart by not attacking Russians, but waiting for their so-called mid attacks. What is a mid attack? It's 100 Russian soldiers. They are going ahead on the Ukrainian front lines. Ukrainians are killing almost all of them. Say 98 are killed, 2 are remaining alive. They're making their way back, and they're joined by another 98 fresh soldiers now another 100 is going ahead for an attack with the same result. 98 killed, 2 remain and coming back to Russian front lines. The process repeats itself. That's how Russians are losing so many people, because they have a political will of their leader Putin to grab as much land as possible at any cost. It doesn't matter. 98 killed or 198 or 598. It just doesn't matter at all. It's just to take another 10 meters or 45 or whatever piece of land they can grab.
Hey, Sasha, if I remember correctly, and Rick can correct me because it's an old folklore kind of saying and everything, I believe that the old saying is the definition of crazy is to do the same thing over and over and get the same results or something along those lines.
Expecting different results. Keep doing stuff and expect different results.
It's like one of the definitions of crazy. So that definitely sounds to me like that is what is going on in this particular situation, because they keep doing the same thing over and over and they're getting the same results, as you have pointed out on this show several times and everything. But one of the things that Dr. Jonathan talks about all the time, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, is this notion of a cutting off the Crimea by the bridge. Is this something that is still in play, or will it be in play this winter and everything? Because I know y'all have been talking about it for 2 years, but as of yet, it hasn't happened. But I know that that's something that he's been talking about for a number of years, this notion of cutting off by destroying the bridge and everything like that. So what is your take on that? Sasha?
I think that this bridge will be eventually destroyed, but only when there will be a complete frontal attack by Ukrainians against Crimea. Then, and only then, it will make a lot of effect to actually liquidate the bridge. Right now, okay, you may liquidate or not, that's not going to change things a lot, because Russians are getting their supplies from the land ways, not through the bridge. They know that the bridge is doomed and they're almost not using it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Now, also what I understand, Sasha, is that they have a World War II mentality. That Stalin had a choice, either to send men or shoot with bullets. He said, let's hold off on the bullets. We don't have that many of them. Let's send the men in because we got plenty of them. And if they all die, so what? We'll just bring some more on. Does Putin still have that type of mentality? In other words, he just doesn't care if these people get slaughtered in the Eastern Front, because a lot of them are not from, like St. Petersburg and Moscow. There's some from these outer line areas of Siberia, and he just doesn't care about them. Is that what he's doing? He goes, well, I just get rid of some people I didn't need anyway.
I think you are right. I think goal of Putin is to get as many Russians killed as possible. Why? Because imagine that the war would stop today. Remember what's happened when Afghanistan war stopped with Russians, and hundreds of thousands fighters from Afghanistan came back home when there is no jobs, there is nowhere to live. So there were a lot of bands formed who were robbing people and provided all kind of illegal mafia services. And that's what most likely will happen to Russia when they will stop the war, and hundreds of thousands fighters will come back home when there is no food, there is no jobs, there is nothing. So they will start to rob the population. And that's exactly what happened when a few months ago, Russians took over control of part of Kursk, which was captured by Ukrainians. So when Ukrainians went out of Kursk, Russian troops started to rob their own population. That's what awaiting Russia. This is why Putin is continuing the war, trying to get as many Russians to be killed as possible.
However, this is great news if you want a Russian girlfriend. if an entire generation of Russian men is being wiped out, if you can somehow avoid being sent to Ukraine as a Russian man, you will have your pick of Russian women, even if you've got bad teeth and bad breath, and your eyes are crossed, because there will be no better looking men. They've all been killed.
Rick, not so fast, not so
Okay.
fast, because there are now many cases when Russian wives, they were tell on their husbands who were trying to evade being called to the army. They were going up and saying, okay, my husband is avoiding to being sent to Ukraine. He's hiding. That's a place where he's hiding here and there. And they would catch him and send to Ukraine front. Why she would do such thing as that? Because she would get all the money that are being payable to him, especially in the case when he is killed. She will get all the money. So, Rick, not so fast.
Okay.
Hey, Sasha, just really quickly along those same lines, and I know that this is not always the case, and it's a little bit of a lighter focus on a very serious matter, which is this war and everything like that. But Sasha, I do remember decades ago and everything like that when it was very popular for there to be in newspapers, like some of the makers like Village Voice and stuff like that, where people would be advertising to have a Russian or a Ukrainian wife. So is that still something that is out there? Because I do remember that was something that was big in, I want to say, the 90s and the early 2000s, where a lot of people were being put on the market to get a wife from one of those Eastern Slavian countries.
I can talk about this.
Okay.
Because our kid is in the UK, and sometimes we'll send her money in a wire transfer. And if you do a wire transfer, you have to read a disclaimer. Do not be sending money to a Russian girlfriend. They're not real. They're going to take your money. There is still a huge Russian girlfriend marketplace where you may not even be talking to a real person.
Right.
But they say, I love you. I can't wait to join you in the U.S. Meanwhile, my mother is sick, needs an operation. Can you send $15,000? So that still goes on.
Yep.
I just can't wait to write a check for that. So,
Nick, I'm sure you got a check for that, because I've seen those pitches. They'll sometimes even tell you they got entire businesses. So I know they've asked you for this money.
Yeah, it's I just can't wait to do that.
But some people offer. Now, I don't know how it works now, since we're basically at war with Russia. They used to offer like Russian bride tours. Creepy guys from the U.S. who can't get an American girlfriend would, spend $50,000 to go over to these countries and be introduced to beautiful young women. And I'm sure it was mostly a scam, but if you're not completely disgusting, maybe there are some Russian women who want to get the hell out of the country and who would put up with being married to you for a year in America and then can divorce you and live in America.
Speaking of that, I do have a very serious question, and it involves sports and everything. Sasha, because Rick's there in LA and the Olympics are going to come up very shortly and everything like that. So are we going to see a push to have a boycott against Russian athletes? I know that happened in the past and everything like that. So we're going to see a push to not allow the Russians at all to participate in international competitions such as the Olympics, because that's going to come up, I think, next year.
The Russians are already prohibited because they abused steroids. So the Russians haven't been allowed to compete in some recent Olympics because their teams are corrupt, and any Russian athletes had to compete in an independent category where they were competing, for themselves rather than for their country.
And it's not even something to do with the United States. It's an Olympic Committee who stripped Russians of the right to participate in Olympic Games, and nobody is missing them, by the way.
About 10 years ago, they caught, there's a piss lab at the Olympics where they're like, we need you to pee into the cup. And then they take the cups from all the athletes and they put it in this, fortified room. And somebody did some investigation. I don't know whether it was at Sochi or whatever Olympics it was.
So
The Russians had built a secret doorway into the secure lab where they could open up the door and switch out the pee. It was just crazy.
They had their own little spy thing going on. Sasha, just really quickly, because I'm always fascinated that people were surprised that the Ukrainians were able to put up such a great defense and everything like that. Because I know that even Trump had said that the war wouldn't last that long. I think he said maybe a matter of, and Putin himself, a matter of days and things along those lines. But one of the things that I have always admired about the Ukrainians is that they have always been a very warrior-like mentality and everything like that. And I think about like the boxers that had fought in the Olympics, speaking of the Olympics and everything like that. And Ukrainians have always had that kind of like fierce determination. And I'm not just saying that because I know you're of Ukrainian descent, but I've always admired the Ukrainian boxers. They put on a great display with some of our American boxers and even defeated some of them. So were you surprised that people were as surprised about the Ukrainian fortitude? Because Ukrainians have always had that toughness about them.
No, I'm not surprised, but I admire what I can see, what's happening on the front lines and
Right.
how valiant they are. And needless to say that Europeans, considering Ukraine as a part of Europe, as a part of overall defense system of Europe, they don't rely on United States anymore. And Europe is resolved to defend Ukraine and themselves as a byproduct, so-called.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And the other thing that I saw, because I think I mentioned to you and I mentioned on some other shows that I am a judge of a film festival. It's a documentary film festival. And one of them was actually talking about the Christmas pageantry, because we're going to get into not just Thanksgiving, but the Christmas season as well. And there was a group of Ukrainian performers, and there was a documentary about them that was literally traveling around, even during wartime, doing basically like Christmas pageantry type plays and everything, even in the middle of the war. And we're not letting the war stop them from doing their entertainment. You know, I'm a big fan of the entertainment world and everything like that, but they were still not letting the war stop them. Just like I've seen people play chess in the middle of this war and everything. So a lot of times they are, even though they're in the middle of a war and in war zones, they are still trying to live their life to the best way they can and live it as normal as possible. And that's something that I've been really admiring. And I even wish I could think of the name of the movie. If I could, I'd share it with you, Sasha. But it was quite a powerful movie. But it was people that were traveling around doing this play. And it involved I think a goat or a lion. It was one of the symbols that you would know from Ukraine.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example. And with that, we are coming to the end of today's program. I would like to thank you very much for helping me with today's program. And glory to Ukraine, and have a great weekend. We'll see you all on Tuesday, same place, same time.
And we'll have our regular people back, because I know that Ivan's been in the middle, so we should have our regular people back on Tuesday, which will be Ivan and Dr. Wood and everything like that. So cool. All right. So I'll see you then, and we'll see you for the recording of the share show in about a half an hour.
Thanks. Bye-bye.